Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Wherever you are and whatever you're doing, I hope you're having a fantastic day. In this video, let's take a look at 16 of the most important things in Spider-Man 2 that the game just doesn't tell you. And these tips are coming from someone who has over 30 hours in the game. I've already got the Platinum Trophy. My primary purpose here is to give you some spoiler-free advice and help you enjoy the game to its fullest. So enough stalling, let's jump into the top 16 things I wish I knew before I started playing Marvel's Spider-Man 2. This is going to be a big one, so grab a notepad and some snacks and let's jump straight into tip number 1. This is probably the most obvious tip on this list, but it's so important that I really wanted to stress it for anyone who doesn't know just how powerful fast travel is in Spider-Man 2. As you can see here, once you have unlocked fast travel for a district, you can then literally choose the specific location within that district that you want to fast travel to. And as soon as you have finished holding down triangle, there will be a beautifully seamless transition and you will be there instantly. No loading screens, and it drops you exactly where you want to be. This is the most seamless fast travel I have ever seen. So you want to go around and unlock fast travel for every district as soon as you can. And another way you can use this to your advantage, as you see here, I have the fast travel for Central Park, but I don't have the fast travel for Midtown. So I will position myself as close to the corner of Midtown as I possibly can, and now I'm basically already there. Because of the fact that you can manipulate fast travel like this, you only really need to unlock fast travel for half the areas in the game before you can effectively instantly teleport to every single one of them. And if you didn't know, to unlock fast travel, all you need to do is build up that district progress bar up to the second reward. And you can do this through collectibles, crimes, main missions, side missions, tasks, you name it. Every single activity you do in that area will build up your district progress until you eventually unlock fast travel. So do this ASAP for as many districts as possible, and you will be flying throughout New York faster than you ever thought possible. The next tip is to always use performance mode. Just take a look at how gorgeous and smooth the city is as we are flying and swinging through the financial district. Everything looks and feels so stunning. Now let's head into the visuals and change it to fidelity. And immediately you can feel the jankiness. In theory, this is going to make the graphics look better, but the detriment this causes to your gameplay significantly outweighs the tiny graphical improvement you will gain from fidelity mode. As we see them both side by side, there is a significant difference, and especially for people that suffer with motion sickness, after only a few minutes of playing with fidelity mode, I started to feel very sick. Stick to performance mode because it will tremendously increase your enjoyment of the game. Before we jump into the next tip, you've just got yourself a brand new phone and you're looking for the best mobile game to play. Enter Raid Shadow Legends. With awesome visuals, loads of powerful champions, challenging PvE bosses, and tactical PvP content. You're no doubt familiar with the game Kiss, Marry, Kill, right? Let's play with some of the Halloween champions that Raid have to offer, and also I would like to thank Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video. Firstly, I'd kiss Madame Ceres because she's absolutely devastating in the arena with her abilities removing buffs and debuffing the hell out of her enemies. I'd marry Sify because I feel so sorry for her. She's a lost bride. Plus, it'd be cool to have a legendary champion as a wife. And finally, I'd kill the miscreated monster because he's absolutely terrifying. Prepare for a scare, as there'll be treats and tricks for those who brave the raid yard. Simply download Raid Shadow Legends using the link below, copy your in-game player ID, and venture over to raidyard.plarium.com. And from October 15th to November 20th, you can venture into the Haunted Graveyard. Here, you can grab a shovel, pick a grave, and start digging, as you'll be in with a chance for some amazing in-game items and even real-life prizes, ranging from epic and legendary Halloween champions to Amazon gift cards worth a total of $20,000. Use my link in the description or scan the QR code to get insane bonuses, including an epic champion Knight Errant from the Bannerlords faction and other useful items such as energy refills, skill tomes, and XP boosters. Now let's get back to the video. The next tip is to stop crimes. These are super quick and easy encounters that are going to net you some experience and some tech parts. And I will talk about specifically why that is so important in the next tip. But for now, talking about the crimes themselves, they are very quick and very easy to complete. My absolute favourite to see is a high-speed chase. Just get near a car, press triangle to latch onto it, press square to stop the baddie from hitting you, and that's it. You have just netted yourself a bunch of experience and a bunch of tech parts. It's that quick and that easy. Now, you obviously don't want to go around doing every single crime that gets reported, because that could quite literally take over your entire game. But in between missions, try and do at least one or two, especially if you didn't purchase the digital deluxe edition, just to keep up with the experience. XP and tech parts are extremely needed later on in the game, and we will talk about why in the upcoming tips. For now, just keep in mind, if you see a crime pop up and you haven't done one in a while, make sure you go and do it. Don't neglect them entirely. As we're already on the topic, the next tip is to collect as much tech as you can. There are a few different types of components in this game. You've also got rare tech parts, hero components, and I think a few more, but I am specifically just talking about the bog standard tech parts. And this is one of the main reasons you want to be opening these chests and stopping crimes. Early on in the game, you'll feel like you have thousands and thousands of tech parts, and barely any rare tech parts or hero tokens or anything like that. However, when you get very late on in the game, you'll realize that because you've been neglecting these crates and because you've been neglecting these crimes, you are now running very short on tech parts, and you can't unlock the last few abilities, you can't unlock the last few suits. Eventually, you genuinely do need thousands of these. So always make a slight detour to go and grab a few more, because otherwise you will be grinding to try and find that extra few thousand that you're missing at the end of the game. It's always better to have too many than not enough, to make sure that the next time you can unlock a new gadget or a new suit, you're not left wanting.
We should take this on the road sometime.
And the final tip on the topic of parts and components, every time you do have enough to be able to upgrade your suit tech or your ability or one of your gadgets, make sure you do it. Don't save them up like I usually do. I tend to neglect them for a few missions and then do mass upgrades all at once. Even on the lower difficulties, this game can be quite challenging. Certain missions are a very significant jump in difficulty, and if you've been ignoring your skills, abilities, and gadgets and just saving up your components, you're going to be making it far more difficult than it needs to be. So at the end of a mission, when you have gone and grabbed a few tech boxes, stopped a few crimes, done a few side missions, check your menu and make sure you have upgraded and bought everything you can before going into the next main mission. Some of these upgrades are absolutely vital and will completely change your playstyle. And by neglecting them and saving them up, you are just detrimenting yourself. So, I will say it just once more before I move on from this tip. I know it sounds like I'm beating a dead horse at this point, but I cannot stress enough. Spend your currency. Upgrade your things. It is so important. The next tip is to use your web wings. I know how easy it is to forget them, or just not want to use them because they're not as stylish and cool and showy-offy as swinging from building to building. But trust me, getting used to using your web wings in tandem with using your web to swing through the city will give you a much better experience. You can use them to take advantage of wind tunnels and updrafts. And not only that, it's just a really easy, chill way to traverse the city, especially if you've got some really good air. They can get you very far with minimal effort, and when you utilize swinging with your web wings in tandem, it just makes for such a pleasant experience, and makes you feel ridiculously cool at the same time as well. To explain what I mean, let me just play you a short part of this mission uninterrupted, because it is absolutely beautiful. The next tip is to make sure that you're experiencing all parts of the game simultaneously. And what I mean by this is don't just focus on rushing collectibles or side missions or whatever it is you may be tunneling into and focusing on. Try to split all of the different activities nice and evenly. And the main reason that you want to do this is to make sure you're keeping up with a nice level curve. As mentioned previously, some of the missions can ramp up in difficulty very fast, and I'm not just talking main missions. Certain side missions, certain collectibles will have a big end boss at the end of them. And if you have just been rushing that and ignoring the main missions or ignoring the tasks, then by the time you get to the end of that particular quest chain, you might end up soft-locking yourself because your character is very underleveled and you're facing a really tough enemy. So try and traverse the city and do everything quite evenly instead of rushing one particular task. Because not only will you find the game much easier, but also you won't get bored then just trying to grind every single spider bot or every single collectible. You'll be giving yourself a break and you'll be experiencing everything at a really nice pace that way. The next tip is probably going to be quite hard for fans of Peter Parker to hear. He may be your favorite of the two Spider-Men, especially because he is the one who gets all of the symbiote powers. So if you love Venom and want to feel like a total badass, of course Peter is going to be your choice. And the reason you're not going to want to hear this is because the next tip is to use Miles over Peter whenever you can. And there is a very good reason for this. The only real endgame challenges all require you to use Miles. So you need to get good at him and you need to learn and understand his powers, because he's the one where your skills will be pushed further towards their limits. Pretty much all of Peter's missions are really easy, so you need to say goodbye to your ridiculously strong symbiote powers and get used to using the skills that are on offer to Miles instead. However, trust me, you will learn to love him. Peter was my favorite for the longest time, and now I adore using Miles. I think his powers are absolutely fantastic, and when used right, they are even stronger than the symbiote powers. And you may be asking yourself, what endgame challenges am I talking about? Well, that leads us perfectly into the next tip. Once you have completely maxed out all your gadgets, abilities, skills, powers, you name it, the only thing that is really going to give you any kind of challenge is the Mysterium. And even then, most of the Mysteriums are pretty easy. There's only one or two that are a challenge. But that being said, my advice for this tip is to put off the Mysterium challenges until you reach the end game. If you try and do them as soon as you unlock them, most of them will give you a significant challenge and they will be very, very tough to beat. And this is exactly why you want to favor Miles, level up his skills, get good with using his abilities, so that you can tackle the Mysterium challenges and the other endgame levels that require you to use Miles. And if the Mysterium is still giving you a hard time, please let me know in the comments, because I have completed all of them on gold on the maximum difficulty. So if you would like a guide talking you through how to tackle each of the different Mysteriums, please let me know and I shall make that happen.
Can't believe I'm out of there.
You're okay. Safe and sound.
This next tip is more of just an FYI. As we're talking about the end game, you don't need to worry, the game will warn you when you get to the point of no return. It will tell you when you enter this mission, this is your final opportunity to wrap up the rest of the missions and get your final upgrades before you head into the final phase of the game. So you don't need to worry about going in unprepared because it will fully warn you. And on top of that, even if you don't, for some reason, want to complete everything before going into the final missions, don't worry, because once you have finished, you are then free to roam the world at your leisure, and anything you didn't complete will become available to you again. So you can 100% complete the game, even once you have already finished the main story arc. Something that I'm sure is fantastic news for everyone. The next tip is to be cautious in combat. Especially in the early game, you are surprisingly squishy. And if you try to go toe-to-toe with the hunters dual-wielding machetes or any shield-wielding enemies, most of the time they will get the better of you. Even on lower difficulties, certain enemies are surprisingly tough if you aren't fully prepared. So what you want to do is be cautious, play defensive, build up your ability bars and your gadgets, and then unleash hell on all of the more scary, bigger enemies. And I will deep dive and go even more specific on exactly what I mean in tip number 15. So hold that thought, we'll come back to it shortly. This next tip is actually a series of traversal techniques that will help you have more fun as you're traveling around New York. This first one is particularly prominent in combat because you walk around very slowly, and simply all you need to do to combat this is hold down R2. If you're holding R2, you will start to sprint, and it is so much easier to get from A to B without having to rely on your webs when you're in small closed spaces. As you can see here, if I start to try and involve web swinging, I'm crashing into buildings. It becomes very difficult to manage traversing small enclosed spaces. So what you want to do is just stay on the floor and hold R2 to start sprinting around. The next tip is extremely useful if you're up high going at incredible speeds and you're trying to land on a specific place to get a better view of your next mission, or if you want to get the drop on some enemies. As you're flying around, you'll see this circle with the dot in the middle appearing on the edges of buildings and on objects. And if you press L2 and R2 simultaneously, you will immediately and effortlessly pull yourself towards your target and come to a complete stop. The game does teach you this, but it is easy to forget. This is so much better than fumbling around trying to use X and circle and R2 and the various other traversal options to try and get yourself to stop on top of a building. Just find somewhere that you see that reticle pop up, press L2 and R2, job done. And the final traversal tip I have for you, if you keep swinging round and round a particularly tall building that you would love to get on top of, and you're just stuck in this loop of not really gaining any height, just crash into it and then start holding R2 to sprint up the side of the building. And to make it even quicker, keep mashing X as well, and you will shoot out your webs and zip up the building in no time. This is a really quick and easy way to get on the top of any building that you want to get on top of. And then again, when you're near the top, you can use L2 and R2 simultaneously to very quickly zip to a standstill. Tip number 13 is kind of a culmination of all the combat tips we've spoken about so far throughout this video. And this is basically just don't forget to use all of your abilities in combat. The further through the game you get and the more skills you unlock, and the higher level your character becomes, the more tools you will acquire to refresh your abilities faster and faster during combat. Especially when you unlock your ultimate ability, far enough down the skill tree, you will also unlock a complementary skill that will instantly refresh every single one of your abilities every time you use your ultimate ability. So make sure you do not leave that bar full for long. When you have your ultimate, as long as there's a few enemies around, use it, because it will refresh all your abilities and you will be able to take out dozens of enemies within literal seconds. So honestly, especially in the late game when you have many options, don't be afraid of leaving all of your abilities full and waiting for boss fights. They all recharge so fast, and then your ultimate ability will recharge them again, so make sure that you make use of them all frequently. And when you do come to terms with just how fast your gadgets and abilities recharge, you will then be comfortable just unloading every single one of your skills all at once in very quick succession. And when you do, just a few seconds later, the battlefield will look a little something like this. I have had the most ridiculous things happen when I've unloaded all of my gadgets into a group of enemies, with so many of them being gunked together that they end up flying through the floor in a giant cobweb mess of enemies. It is absolutely hilarious. Tip number 14 is to subscribe to Dom's Roundtable. If you didn't know, this is my full-time career. and I specialize in making guides to cut out all of the fluff in video games so that you can get down to doing what you really enjoy. As I have a lot more time on my hands than most people, I can do all of the tedious investigating and researching and testing and trial and error so that you can get down to actually enjoying the games and having the most fun. So I do these kinds of guides and many others for every single upcoming release that I can get my hands on. So if you haven't already, you can go and check out my Elden Ring videos, my Starfield videos, my Lords of the Fallen videos, and so much more. And that list will be expanding every single week. I always try and keep all of my guides as spoiler-free as possible. So if you are new here and you're enjoying this, please consider subscribing to the channel. And of course, if you could thumbs up the video and leave a comment, it helps me out so much more than you know, and thank you for doing so. And finally, before we move on to the next tip, if there are any specific guides you would like me to cover, Spider-Man related or not, let me know and I will do my best to make it happen. The penultimate tip for this video is to use stealth. It's hard to do, at least for me, because the combat is so insanely satisfying. I want to beat up as many enemies as often as possible. But there are certain missions that will require you to stealth. So getting that practice in missions and environments where you're allowed to fail and you're comfortable to do so is a really good technique for the late game. And also, if you're enjoying this game as much as I did, then you'll want to make sure you are experiencing every single mechanic you possibly can. And there are some fantastic animations and some great skills that you will only be able to see and make use of if you do bother stealthing occasionally. Specifically when you unlock the hunter bases, and that's all I'll say about them because I don't want to spoil it for you. It's fantastic to use a mixture of stealth and combat as you're going through the different sections. So challenging yourself to clear a whole room in stealth can be really fun. And my final tip as we're wrapping up this video is to just enjoy the story and really pay attention to the game world. I usually am someone that skips through most cutscenes and I primarily just care about the gameplay and nothing else. But this had me hooked from start to finish and I am already so excited for the DLC. This is not like me, but I paid so much attention that I already know from all of the hints throughout the game the 3 main villains that we will be fighting in the DLC. And if that interests you, let me know and I'll be happy to create a DLC speculation video where I talk through the 2 main protagonists that you'll be playing as. And no, they are not the Spider-Men, and also the 3 main villains that you'll be facing off against, along with a few other baddies that may be making a return to the game. Hopefully though, if you've been paying as much attention as me, you will already know the characters that I am talking about and hopefully be just as excited for the DLC as I am. This was a truly wonderful experience, and the only thing that saddens me is that it wasn't longer. I already am planning on doing an ultimate difficulty challenge run over on Twitch, so go and follow me there if you haven't already. And if you didn't know, ultimate difficulty is unlocked only once you have completed the whole game. I adore this game so much, I don't want it to end, so hopefully ultimate difficulty will sate my thirst at least for now. And that's it for my top 16 tips, secrets, things the game didn't tell you, whatever you want to call it. Let me know what you'd like me to cover next. But for now, all that's left for me to say is thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.